So we're super excited, Michael, to have you. Thank you so much for being here. This is what, your third webinar with Fiverr?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and you did some in-person events before COVID too, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so Michael's been involved for quite a while. We're super excited to have him. So I think we should just go ahead and turn it over to you. Are you ready to do this?
I'm ready.
Cool. And just as a reminder, if you're just joining us, we will have a live Q&A at the end. So please put all of your questions in the Q&A section for Michael. All right, take it away.
Hi, welcome everybody to Content Writing for Search, live from my living room. So a quick introduction about myself. My name is Michael Shigela. I have 16 years experience in enterprise level SEO. I've worked for brands such as Sony, AIG, and the NFL. I'm a former marketing executive at one of the 10 largest renewable energy companies in California, San Diego Business Journal Information Technology Executive of the Year, and finalist for San Diego Top Tech Exec. I work directly with Google's Brand Accelerator team as a consultant, bridging the gap between Google's artificial intelligence algorithm and corporate brands. And today I prefer my home office to the corporate world. So what we're going to cover today. So content writing is a very broad topic. We're not going to cover everything there is to cover. For example, I'm not going to teach you how to write. Presumably you already have a handle on that. This is more tips and tricks for beginners getting started with getting their content found in Google. For most new writers, they focus mainly on writing excellent content, which is, of course, the most important thing about writing, but maybe haven't spent time on how to get that content found in Google. And as Marcy said, there's going to be a question and answer session at the end. So first, we're going to start with a little bit on how Google works. So what is Google Organic Search? Google's search algorithm is a complex software program that continually scans the internet, collecting information. It collects information on websites, how they connect to one another, and perhaps most important is human behavior. How do people interact with these elements on the web? And Google takes this information and builds a database on what it finds, sort of like a small model of the internet. And it uses this information to deliver search results that users will find useful. So for example, someone searches yoga for cows. Google searches its database and finds all the websites with information about yoga for cows. And it delivers these websites to the user ranked in order of relevance. And it's this ranked in order of relevance that we're going to be focused on today. And all this happens in less than a second. So how exactly does Google decide rank? So back to ranked in order of relevance. What does that mean? So for a search like yoga for cows, there might only be one relevant website on the entire internet, making it the clear winner for the #1 spot in Google. So in my screenshot here on the right, someone types in yoga for cows. Google knows there's only one website that relates to this, so it gets the #1 position, and followed by just other information that Google thinks relates and that users may find useful. But this is a simplistic version, and this is actually a mocked up screenshot. You're not actually going to find these results. But what happens when there's many similar websites? So in this screenshot, where to buy face masks. So Google finds 573 million results. Now, how do you possibly get yourself up high enough to be found by visitors? How does Google rank? How does Google rank these websites? It's not actually as complicated as you may think. Google runs each website in its database against a checklist of search signals, is what they're called, until winners and losers emerge. And you can see in the screenshot that BuzzFeed.com ranks number 1. And I'll give you a little insight into how they got there. So this checklist that I described in that previous slide. So what is the checklist in simplified terms that Google uses to rank websites? It's things like, is the website's content relevant and informative? Will the website display properly on a user's device? For example, if your website doesn't load well for people on mobile phones, Google's probably not going to deliver that highly in search results for someone on a mobile phone. Is a user located in close proximity to the business? This might not be relevant on a national scale. If you don't have a brick and mortar business, proximity is maybe less important. Does a website use a secured HTTPS connection? How long has the website been live? Have previous website visitors stayed long and visited multiple pages, indicating to Google that its content is valuable? Can the website easily be navigated by people with disabilities? Google will extend this list as long as possible till it can find winners and losers. So pro tip, search engine optimization is based simply on having more boxes checked than your competition. So maybe your site displays well on a mobile device and your competitor doesn't, and that might be enough for you to outrank them. So included in this list is content. Content is the foundation of SEO. It is the first thing that Google looks for when ranking a website. Essentially, Google is trying to match users to the information they're looking for. So for example, someone searches the history of cow yoga, and Google knows about a page of content with titles on it, such as cow yoga history, where did cow yoga originate? Google is likely to rank that page highly when someone does this search. But of course, it's more complicated than that. How do you get your content found in a sea of similar pages? If you want to write an article about healthy recipes, again, Google, you may be amongst 100 million pages offering up similar information. So how do you get found? So let's take a look at what Google sees when it looks at content. So the screenshot on the left is content from a pavement company. Now, Google will certainly read all the content that it comes across, but for the most part, it will distill that content down to things like titles, and it'll look for main keywords, and will sort of ignore the fluff in between. And that's a little simplified because it does use some of the fluff to understand sort of the intent of the article. Like, is the article just trying to give someone information, or is this article trying to get someone to buy a product? And Google uses that kind of information, but for the most part, it distills your content down to keywords, related keywords, and titles. So extending on this example, this pavement reconstruction article, Google takes those keywords and titles it finds, and it says, okay, this article is about pavement reconstruction, and it touches on some subtopics like pavement preservation, traffic, pavement maintenance, roadway cost, asphalt, concrete. So this way, when users are doing searches for pavement-related topics and someone searches pavement reconstruction, Google now knows it has an article that matches well with the intent of that search, and this article is likely to rank well as a result. Picking a topic. You want to pick a topic for your blog or article that people are searching for. For example, let's say you love sewing and you start an online clothing store and you invent a product, hats for toes or toe hats. Now, nobody is searching Google for toe hats. Don't write an article called toe hats for sale. It does you no good to rank #1 for a search that nobody is searching. The only exception to that is if you are forecasting that in 6 months from now, toe hats is going to be all the rage and you want to position yourself in position 1 for when that day comes, that's a solid strategy. But for the most part, you want to be found for things that people are searching for now. So instead, do write how to keep your toes warm and introduce people to toe hats. Extending on that is competition. Pick a topic that is within your reach to be ranked in Google. This is the most common mistake I see. For example, let's say your online clothing store sells kids' clothes. If you write an article titled Kids Clothing, your competition on Google's page 1 are companies like Macy's, Kohl's, Target, Nordstrom's, Amazon. You're not going to unseat these people out of page 1. These companies have probably spent hundreds of thousands of dollars per month on SEO for the last 10 years. And your Shopify site you launched last week isn't going to come in and bump one of those people out. But there is a way to get traffic to your site. Which is when the competition is strong, go niche. So getting on page 1 for kids' clothing might not be realistic, but while your competition is fighting over high value keywords, they're overlooking niche keywords that are within your reach. And 2 categories of niche keywords are long tail, which are things like kids clothing for tall 5-year-old boys, or hypoallergenic natural fiber kids clothing, or kids clothing with matching face mask. Or you can go localized. Where to buy kids clothing in Denver, trendy winter kids clothing in Peru 2020. Now, you might be able to get your article found for these searches, and they might not have the high search volume as ranking on page 1 for kids clothing in general. But if you accumulate enough of these niche keywords, that can almost equal the volume of traffic you get from kids clothing. And a pro tip. If you don't know what keywords are being searched, if you need ideas, Google will show you. If you start typing into Google's search box, it will give you suggestions on what other people are searching. And hold on one moment for me. All right. So writing, this is sort of a general topic, mostly kind of tips and tricks. But a good place to start, and a question that I get asked a lot, is minimum word count. So on average, articles and blogs should be no less than 400 words. Anything less than 400 words, and Google is going to have perhaps a hard time understanding the meaning of your content. And if Google isn't confident that it understands the meaning of your content, it's not likely to put it in front of visitors in search results. Also, anything less than 400 words results in a very small pool of keywords. And what happens then is, even if you do get this article to rank in Google, it may only rank for a very narrow range of keywords. Now, maximum word count. There's no value in writing longer than you can keep your audience's attention. For example, a 20,000 word article creates a giant, rich pool of keywords. But if visitors leave after 30 seconds, Google will assume the content is not valuable to them. On average, an interested user will read 1,500 to 2,500 words. I typically like to stay in about the 1,500 range. That puts the length of my articles sort of a little longer than average against my competitors, but it's still short enough where people are likely to read to the end. And perhaps most important is, don't add fluff. If your client asks you for 1,000 words of content and you spend the first 200 words writing a bunch of fluff, that's a good way to get readers to abandon your page. Don't make them wait too long to get to the information they're looking for. You know, a little bit of introduction and context is fine, but not a bunch of fluff. Spelling and grammar. Don't underestimate Google's ability to recognize spelling and grammar. And don't underestimate Google's ability to rank you accordingly. Google is always looking for ways to rank one website higher than the next. And if two websites or two pages of content are ranking equally and Google's having a hard time deciding who should rank higher, it's likely to look at spelling and grammar. And really, every element on the page has the potential to either increase or decrease rank. Regional differences are okay, especially when it matches the audience. For example, there can be sort of the American spelling of something like color versus the UK version, which is OUR at the end, or email address versus email ID. Again, especially if you're writing in a way that matches your audience, and try to stay consistent. Don't write one article in sort of Americanized English and the next one in sort of UK's version of English, unless you've got sort of an international site and your site is just a combination of all different writing styles. But for the most part, try to stay consistent. And another pro tip, find out ahead of time if Google is going to find spelling and grammar mistakes. This is easy to do. In fact, there's really no excuse anymore for spelling and grammar mistakes because Google is absolutely excellent at recognizing them. The way to do this is open up a Google Doc and paste your content in there, and Google will underline where it finds potential problems. Internal cross-linking. Now this is different than backlinking, and we're not really going to get into backlinks in this presentation. They deserve their own presentation. But crosslinks are perhaps equally as important. A crosslink is a link from one page to another within the same website. And the benefits to crosslinking are, for visitors, it helps them explore a website, especially a website with several hundred pages. The webmaster can't put links to all those pages in the main navigation. It's overwhelming. So sometimes the only way to get a visitor to discover another page on the website is to have them come across a link within content. And for site owners, crosslinks help keep visitors on their website longer. The longer you keep someone on a website, the more likely they are to convert to a sale or whatever other goal you have for these people. And for Google, it provides valuable data on how users are interacting with the website. Every time a visitor clicks on a link, Google has a little more information on exactly what this visitor is interested in and can help rank your site accordingly. The way Google knows some of this is most websites have Google Analytics kind of behind the scenes running code, and this lets Google see how users are interacting with the website. Another pro tip, cross-link text should be keywords the other page wants to rank for. So a bad example would be a sentence, if interested, click here to buy kids' clothes. The word here has no value. It doesn't indicate any intent or interest to Google or the visitor. A better example is, if interested, click to buy kids' clothes. And what I mean here is buy kids' clothes is the clickable portion of that sentence. Time on page. This is one of the most overlooked rank factors. Google knows how long visitors stay on pages. And again, this is partly because most websites have Google Analytics running behind the scenes, and Google is able to get a lot of visitor information as a result. If a visitor leaves your page too fast, Google assumes they didn't find the content to be valuable. There's no value in writing longer than you can keep your audience's attention. So to help keep your audience's attention and to keep them engaged and stay longer, you can use visual elements, things like pull quotes. These are sort of visual partitions within your text so that it sort of breaks up the monotony of a long chunk of text. You can add infographics, you can embed video. And not only do these kind of break up your content visually, but it gives people additional ways to consume the information. Not everyone consumes information best or easiest by simply reading text. Keyword density is another question that I get all the time. And there's no solid rule to follow here. Keyword density refers to how often keywords appear in your text. The short answer is just write naturally. Chances are, if you just write naturally, you're going to hit enough of the keywords for Google to know what you're writing about. Just don't be too vague. But do kind of double check and make sure that your primary keyword appears several times, along with other related keywords that sort of support your primary keyword. Another pro tip, if you want to see what keyword density is working best, go to the website that is ranking first, copy that text, paste it into a Google Doc, and do a search. In this case, this pavement preservation content, I paste it into Google Docs. You can also do this in Word. Control F, it looks like I've got Control 1 in here, but I really meant to put Control F. Usually opens up the find functionality. And this will highlight, you do a search on a keyword and it highlights every appearance of that keyword in the text. And you get a quick representation of kind of the saturation level of that keyword in the text. And if this is the density that the top ranked page is using, that's a pretty good indication that that is what Google is looking for. And hopefully you all know this already, but do not copy from other sources. Not only is plagiarism unethical and sometimes illegal, it has no SEO value. In fact, if you do this on a regular basis, Google is very good at recognizing when this is happening and will actually start to penalize your website if you're copying other people's content. And it knows who's copying from who because it knows who was the first person on the internet to post content. And so it necessarily knows that everyone who follows has copied it. And also your client might run your content through plagiarism checker. And you never want to be in the situation to try to explain that because you really can't. I mean, you're sort of caught. Now, product descriptions are a slightly different animal, but I do get enough questions where this deserved a section in this presentation. Now, why they are difficult. You usually have a very small amount of space to write a product description. And as a result, it's really hard to, there's not much opportunity to use your text to help get found in search results. There's no real great solution to this. But keep in mind that one of Google's rank factors is when people come to a product page, do they continue on to make a sale? So if you focus first on selling the product and that product results in a lot of sales, that's the most important thing you can do for SEO for this product page. Is just try to get it to convert to sales. Don't try to stuff a bunch of keywords into 100 word count. It's just going to be awkward. But you can follow some basic guidelines. And these guidelines for writing product descriptions, this is a little bit more about the science of conversion rate optimization and not exactly SEO. But like I described in the previous slide, they kind of go hand in hand. So traditionally, the best way to get a product to sell is to have awesome images. Now, unfortunately, as a content writer, you may have nothing to do with the images that are on that product page. Know your audience. Are you trying to sell products to teenagers, or are you selling products to educated adults? Is this an impulse buy or something that has been researched? An impulse buy is an example of an impulse buy is kind of a disruptive ad put in front of someone to get them to buy something they weren't already thinking about. And when they come to your product page, maybe use language like buy now, free shipping, get this, get this now, or maybe put an offer in front of them. Versus a research buy, which is maybe like a vacation property, which someone has been researching for the last 6 months, and they're not going to respond to buy now or, get a free toaster. You just got to pay attention to kind of where people are in the sales funnel and kind of the psychology of them. Focus on product benefits and borrow from the competition. Probably the most important pro tip of this entire presentation is websites, pages, product pages, you name it, that are ranked #1 in Google don't have the ability to hide from you what they are doing to get there. Go look and see what the #1 ranked websites are doing. And don't copy their product descriptions, but you can get a feel for their tone and sort of the language they're using and use the same on your product page content. Now, again, if there's not enough space to influence rank using content on a product page, there are plenty other ways to do SEO. There's backlinks, guest blogs, video, social media. We're not going to get into those in this presentation, but just know that there are plenty of other ways to get your product page or your content in general to rank higher in Google. And similar to not plagiarizing is don't just copy the manufacturer's description of a product. This creates duplicate content. And if you do this, you're basically going to have this, you're probably going to have the same description as the 100 or 1,000 other websites out there selling the same product. And there's no SEO value in this whatsoever. Google will recognize it as duplicate content and all but ignore it. Write your own product descriptions, or at least rewrite the manufacturer's description so it's not an exact copy. And how to get buyers. So this is how to get buyers on Fiverr, of course. Among the first things that a potential buyer is going to look at is stars. 5 stars and lots of them. You need to do whatever it takes to make your buyer happy. This is especially crucial at the beginning. Let's say you're new to Fiverr and you've only sold 5 services. If one of those yields a bad review, that's really going to impact your star rating. Now, it has less impact the more reviews you get. For example, in the screenshot, this seller has over 1,000 reviews. This person can afford to get an occasional negative review, and it's probably not going to bump them down from 5 stars. Now, of course, you want to make sure all of your buyers are happy. But again, especially at the beginning, you need to bend over backwards and make these people happy. This sometimes means completely rewriting an article that you spent hours on, or even taking a financial loss in order to make your buyers happy and get that 5-star review. There's almost nothing more important. And again, look at the competition. Look at the top performing gigs. Open 5 or 10 gigs and compare them. How are they describing their service? What's included in their service? What's their price and delivery time? What are they doing differently? And keep in mind that it's not always about being the cheapest. I oftentimes see what's called a race to the bottom in Fiverr, where people are just continually trying to offer a service cheaper, cheaper, and cheaper. But sometimes that gives the buyer their perception that they're getting a lower quality service. You would be surprised if you stuck with a price that you think is fair for the service you're giving them, how many people will respond to that? And perhaps most important, respond to contact requests quickly. I can't stress this enough. By quickly, I mean seconds is ideal, certainly within minutes. If someone contacts you, your browser should blow up, your phone should blow up in your pocket, and you should drop what you're doing and respond to these people. If nothing less, at least say, thank you for reaching out. Let me get back to you in a few minutes. You need to respond to them before they have time to hit the back button, go back out to Fiverr search results, and just find the next seller in the list. And most buyers will ask questions before ordering, especially content writing. Having a communication with someone is not only the easiest way to make a sale, but the fastest way to lose one. If you can get someone engaged in a conversation in Fiverr Messenger, you can answer all their questions in a way that your kind of a gig description can't do. And you can sort of build a relationship with this potential buyer. And it gives you an opportunity to kind of talk them into buying your service. And keep in mind that a buyer will often reach out to several sellers at a time selling the same service, trying to figure out which is the best fit for them. And the way to get the sale is to be the first person who responds. And also be prepared. Know answers to common questions. People are going to ask you, what makes you different? How fast can I see results? What happens if your content doesn't help my rank? Will you upload your content for me? Can I see examples of your work? Or have you written for my industry before? Get a feel for commonly asked questions. And what I do is I actually have a list of what's called canned responses. So I'm not rewriting the same paragraph each time. And another pro tip, this one is also overlooked and critically important, is to look for problematic buyers. If you don't think you can please the buyer, it is okay to tell them politely that you don't think your service is a good fit for them. It's better to walk away from business than to risk a negative review, especially if you are a new seller. And some typical warning signs are, is a buyer expressing to you that they've been burned by previous sellers? Is there too much urgency in their tone? Are they saying things like, I need to be on Google's page 1 next week, or I'm going to be out of business? Or does this buyer know enough about SEO to be dangerous? And what I mean by that is, you get the feel they don't really know a lot about SEO, but they're coming at you with rank reports and where their domain authority score and a lot of kind of technical SEO. That's generally an indication that they're going to have high expectations, which is okay, but they're going to be just too specific. I mean, if you're writing content, you can't promise that this one exact long tail keyword is going to rank #1 in a certain period of time. And it's also important to look at their buyer profile and make sure they don't have negative feedback. To be honest, I've never seen a seller leave negative feedback for a buyer. I'm not sure what their incentive really would be to ever do that, but it's a good idea to look out for that in case you ever do come across it. So that's the end, sort of. Like I said at the beginning, content writing is a broad topic, and I can't possibly cover all of it in one presentation. I think you're going to get equal value out of a Q&A session where I will do my best to answer all of your questions.
That was awesome, Michael. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. We do have a ton of Q&A, so I'm glad we almost have 15 minutes left. But that was perfect. And also I loved what you were saying about tips on being a Fiverr seller as well. We always get a million questions about that. So I appreciate you including that in there. Okay, so let's get started so we can do as many of these as possible. Hashim is asking, does it matter if crosslinks appear mid-paragraph or at the end of as references?
It doesn't particularly matter. It's probably a little better to have your crosslinks in the main body of your content. That'll make it appear a little bit more natural to Google rather than you specifically putting a place at the bottom for crosslinks. But again, it's probably not critical. It's more important to use the right anchor text or hypertext or link text, whatever you want to call it.
Cool. Okay. Okay. Karan is asking, hi, Michael. Also, you're getting fantastic feedback in the chat, so I highly recommend checking that out later, Michael. For a person who's just starting out with copywriting, which SEO tools would you recommend to be able to deliver optimized articles to Fiverr buyers?
Well, the two main SEO platforms are Ahrefs and SEMrush. They both do just about the same thing. I tend to use Ahrefs, but again, they basically do the same thing, but they don't really tell you how to write content particularly. I happen to use a tool called Market Muse, which as I'm writing sort of gives me suggestions on, well, this other website that ranks highly, they've used these keywords, and I sort of keep them in mind as I'm writing.
Cool. Perfect. This one's from Kristen. Do the keywords together have more power than one alone, or do multiple just increase the chances of finding?
Well, the least amount of words in your search phrase or target keyword, the more broad of an audience you're generally going to get. This goes back to like kids clothing. If you're targeting kids clothing, you're casting a pretty wide net, and that also means that that's probably going to be a more competitive search term. But as you get more niche and do a long tail keyword such as kids clothing during lockdowns in Peru during 2020, you're going to get a smaller search volume, but it's going to be easier to rank for that phrase because so few other people are targeting it.
That makes sense. Okay. This one, I believe, is in regards to Fiverr gigs specifically. How do you balance between copying the competition and standing out?
Well, as far as writing your gig descriptions, there is kind of a balance there because sellers are going to read gig descriptions and they're almost desperate to find a difference to kind of cling on to and find why you're special. So specifically try to find something different about your gig to put in there. And it also doesn't hurt to write something sort of personal about you. Let them kind of know who you are. So you're just not another kind of cookie cutter stamped out gig. They kind of put a face behind your service.
Absolutely. And I think with SEO specifically, like any industry specific language you could add is probably good. Because for me, like talking as a buyer, if I were to Google like retail SEO or even like clothing SEO, I would be much more likely to work with someone who's worked with like clothing or retail providers before than someone who typically does like restaurant or like Amazon sellers, or like the more niche you can add into your description, I think the better probably.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just from a buyer perspective. Cool. This might not be specific enough for you to answer, but is it possible that a certain keyword works to restrict your intended search?
Yeah, you can. Well, it is kind of a broad question, but you can accidentally. So let's say that you've got a product page and you write your product description in a way where Google sees it as more geared towards someone who's still in the research phase and not quite ready to actually purchase your product. You kind of have to keep in mind what in the intent you're going after. If you want someone, if you think you're capturing people that are ready to make a purchase, speak to them that way. If you're trying to catch someone a little more upstream who's still researching and they're not ready to pull the trigger, write to them in that sense. But don't put a bunch of buy now language in a page that's meant for someone who is still researching products, and vice versa. Don't give someone research content on a page that's meant to get someone to pull the trigger on a purchase.
Cool. That makes sense. I like this question because it's from the buyer's perspective. This is from Paula. What questions should I ask a Fiverr seller to work out whether they're a good fit for what I need as a buyer?
The most important thing for me, because I'm actually both a buyer and a seller, is when I'm sort of vetting different sellers, I'd like to engage them in a conversation, and I just ask them as many questions as possible. And in a way, it's the answers they have for me, the information I get back from them is only half of what I'm looking for. I'm also trying to get a feel for, are they willing to stay with me for 10 minutes and answer all my questions? Or do they get impatient and tell me, well, just order my service and we'll sort it out? Having this communication gives me a feel for how badly this person wants my service, a level of customer support I can expect, and it gives me a feel for what it's going to be like to work with them after I've ordered their service.
Totally agree with that. Perfect. Let me get another one. Okay. So this one's from Nathaniel. For those of us interested in keyword research, how much value do you find in sites like trends.google.com or answerthepublic.com? Do you recommend making use of them, or should we just stick to looking at how people find your page with Google Analytics?
Google Trends tends to be a little bit too vague. I don't spend a lot of time there. I look in Google Analytics, but then I also have my SEO platforms like Ahrefs, where I can feed in a domain and it will tell me what keywords people are using to find that website, and also where they rank for those keywords. And I find that a little bit more valuable actually than even Google Analytics, although I sort of use them in tandem. And when I use something like Ahrefs, I can get a good feel for the client may want to rank for certain keywords, but I can put their domain name into Ahrefs and see what Google is actually ranking them for and actually thinks that they, should be ranked for. And I can see kind of a difference between a disconnect sometimes between what the client's asking for and what Google thinks their site should rank for. It also gives me an indication of what keywords I should suggest to the client that we should target in our content. For example, if Ahrefs tells me that there's a certain keyword that's ranked at position 11 and it's just one position away from page 1, maybe I'll suggest we write content around that keyword and try to get it nudged over to page 1 where all the search traffic is.
Awesome. I think we have time for 2 more quick ones. So I'll be honest with you, I'm not an SEO expert, so this question doesn't make sense to me, but I'm hoping it makes sense to you. Is citing another online source, such as a copy and paste from that source with original commentary included before and after, still a no-no from an SEO perspective?
No, as long as you're citing the source in a way that Google recognizes that you're citing the source, you're not going to get penalized. But at the same time, you're not going to get any SEO value out of that content, at least not directly. Your visitor may find value in that cited block of text and may stay on your page longer and click around your website more as a result, which indirectly will boost your rank. But you won't get SEO credit for that text itself.
Gotcha. Okay. Gina is also asking in the chat if we can give links to the softwares that you mentioned. So I know one is SEMrush, and then the other that you mentioned, Ahrefs, is that right?
Yeah, SEMrush, all one word, .com.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I did that wrong in the chat. Sorry, y'all. Okay, and then is it the other one, Ahrefs?
Yep, .com.
.com. Cool. Okay. And then last quick question from Justin: for a business that's been in business for 25 years, what's the best way to get a new product launch that's new to the market higher in SEO the fastest? So I guess if you're an older business but you have a new product, what's your recommendation for SEO?
Well, that's a complicated answer, but what I can tell you is that the fact that you were already, if this website has already been ranking well in Google for many keywords for a long time, your site has great authority, which makes it dramatically easier to kind of branch off and try to rank some new content or products that Google hasn't associated you with yet. The bigger problem comes in if you're a brand new website and you're already trying to branch out. That's difficult to do. But anyway, back to the question. Go into your existing content base that you already had and point cross links into these new pages for these new products. That's probably the lowest hanging fruit to try to get some traction with this new content. There's a lot more you can do there, but it's really kind of outside of the scope of the 2 minutes that I have left.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of, if people want to continue the conversation with you, do you have a gig on Fiverr where you just do like consultative work, or like what's the best way for them to get in touch and work with you more?
Go to my profile, just contact me. If you have a need for something that I don't specifically have a gig for, just ask me about it. I can create a custom gig. I actually intentionally limit the number of gigs on my profile just not to give too many options and not to confuse people. But I really offer a full stack of SEO and content writing services. Like I said, just reach out to me through Fiverr Messenger and we'll find a way.
Perfect. I just copy and pasted your profile link in the chat in case anyone wants it. But Michael, thank you so much for being here today. You always do such a fantastic job of explaining things in a way that even I can understand. I have no idea how SEO works. So I really appreciate that. And thank you all 100 and something of you that joined us today. We will see you back for another Fiverr webinar very soon. And in the meantime, please stay safe. Please take care of your mental health, all of the things in relation to this crazy, crazy world right now. But we will see you back next time. And again, Michael, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a great one.